People are sick across the city. Really sick. Turns out it was a simple case of cross-contamination. And the suspects? They were as easy to spot as a tarantula on a slice of wedding cake. Suspect 1, the line worker. Water dripped from a pipe onto this worker's hands. Did she wash them? Did she change her gloves? No. She went right back to work. Suspect 2, the maintenance person. While repairing the line, this wise guy set a screwdriver down on the conveyor belt without cleaning and sanitizing it first. Lucky for these two, the timeline just didn't add up. Which leads me to suspect 3, the safety manager. That's right, the safety manager. Caught red-handed picking trash off the floor and then touching the product. Little did she know how much the city would suffer. The case is closed, but we need to remember that in this world, any person is capable of the most unspeakable violations.
Biological contaminants are microorganisms that can get in or on food. This includes viruses like norovirus and bacteria like Salmonella, Listeria, E. coli, and Campylobacter. Biological contamination is a serious problem because if a person eats a product contaminated with something like Listeria, they can get very sick or even die. Biological contamination happens through a process called cross-contamination, which is when contaminants are transferred from one surface or object to another. For example, raw ingredients such as root vegetables that are in direct contact with the soil could become contaminated while still in the field. In fact, almost any ingredient, such as spices, seasonings, and dry mixes, can be contaminated with salmonella or other bacteria if not handled properly. This is why food safety is so important. Inside a facility, if an equipment surface that touches food becomes contaminated with even a tiny amount of bacteria, an entire batch of product could be cross-contaminated. This is a concern because many foods like fruits and vegetables are consumed without cooking or even peeling. In many types of facilities, food is cooked or pasteurized to a specified temperature for a certain amount of time, which is commonly referred to as a kill step, since it eliminates dangerous bacteria. However, ready-to-eat and cooked products can also be cross-contaminated if they contact a dirty surface or object. So you need to take special care when working with ready-to-eat ingredients or finished foods after the cook step. Since many ready-to-eat foods are refrigerated for some time before they are eaten, even a tiny amount of contamination from something like Listeria could eventually result in a lot of bacteria in the food once it travels through the supply chain to someone's refrigerator. A tool like a cutting knife can also cause cross-contamination if it touches a contaminated product and then touches another product on the line. Cross-contamination could also occur if contaminated water gets into the facility from roof leaks or drips into a product from overhead pipes, condensation, or overspray during production. Even rodents and insects are a cross-contamination threat because they can carry lots of bacteria around on them. If the product will be frozen while still in the plant, do you still have to worry about contaminating it? You sure do. That's because certain types of dangerous bacteria can survive freezing. You need to be careful to not recontaminate ready-to-eat ingredients or cooked foods before they enter the freeze step. Since some pathogens can infect someone with even a tiny dose, and any new bacteria introduced by you may not be killed if the consumer accidentally undercooks the food while reheating it in a microwave, which is a very common problem. Employees can cause cross-contamination. For example, if you don't wash your hands before putting on gloves and entering the production floor, bacteria on your hands could be transferred to the glove and then to the food. And even if you follow correct personal hygiene procedures at the hand washing area, you could still contaminate your gloves if you touch a contaminated non-food contact surface, like the floor. And then spread the contamination if you touch a food contact surface. A food contact surface is anything that directly touches food, such as your sanitary gloves, personal cutting tools, or the conveyor belt. Any surface that does not usually touch food may still be considered a food contact surface if contaminants from it could splash or drip down onto a product below. Once a food contact surface is contaminated, the food that touches it will most likely become contaminated as well. Your face is another example. Cross-contamination can happen if a person sneezes into their gloves, scratches their nose, or otherwise touches their face, and doesn't wash their hands and change their gloves before working with food on the line. It can also happen if a maintenance worker doesn't clean and sanitize their tools before working on a food contact surface, like a conveyor belt. Consider this situation and what you would say to this person.
I wear my gloves all the time. There's no way I could ever cause cross-contamination.
What would you say to this person? You're right. Wearing gloves makes you completely sanitary. It depends on the manufacturer of the gloves. You could still contaminate your gloves if you touch something that's contaminated. You could contaminate your gloves if your hands get too cold. Cross-contamination can happen when contaminants are transferred from one surface or object to another. For example, you could contaminate a product if your gloves touch a contaminated non-food contact surface, like the floor, and then touch a product. Cross-contamination can happen when you wash your hands. Temperatures rise. Contaminants are transferred from one surface to another. Products are put into cold storage. Cross-contamination can happen when contaminants are transferred from one surface or object to another. Biological contamination happens when contaminants, such as viruses and bacteria, are transferred from one surface or object to another. This is called cross-contamination, and it can happen on product lines, from tools, or even from employees. For example, if you don't wash your hands before putting on gloves, bacteria on your hands could be transferred to the glove and then to the food. A food contact surface is anything that directly touches food, such as your sanitary gloves, personal cutting tools, or the conveyor belt. Once a food contact surface is contaminated, the food that touches it will likely become contaminated as well, and can spread to an entire batch. Biological contamination can happen at any step, when a product is raw, after it's cooked, or before it's frozen or packaged.
Pathogens are everywhere. Suit up. With pathogens, the last defense is you.
Let's look at how to prevent biological contamination that might come from you. To start, stay home if you are sick. If you are sick at work, immediately leave the production line and talk to a supervisor. Otherwise, you could spread bacteria and viruses to everything and everyone around you. When you do come to work, always follow your facility's good manufacturing practices, or GMPs, for employee hygiene. Good personal hygiene means wearing a clean uniform and clean personal protective equipment, or PPE, every time you enter the production floor. If your smock or uniform gets dirty, change it as soon as you can. Good hygiene also includes washing your hands with soap and warm water before putting on your gloves, and once your gloves are on, keep an eye on their condition. Your facility may have equipment for rinsing at your workstation. Rinse your gloves as required. If you touch something that could be contaminated, like a non-food contact surface, such as the floor, wash your hands again and then change your gloves. If your gloves are torn, change them immediately. Your hands could contaminate the food. Your tools also have to be maintained. For example, put your cutting tools into a sanitary dip or hot water bath when not being used. Don't eat food or chew gum on the production floor. It could contaminate the area. Keeping an eye on the facility can help prevent biological contamination. For example, bacteria grow well in moisture, so watch for excessive water and report any pools, such as those caused by clogged drains. You should also report any dripping pipes or roof leaks immediately, because contaminants can get into the facility from the outside. When cleaning, be careful to remove any excess water and don't fix pipes with duct tape. It creates a moist environment for bacteria. Leaking gaskets should also be reported and fixed immediately. Don't wait until the end of a production cycle. Carefully remove any damaged or decomposed product from the line or anything that looks like it has been contaminated. Avoid using high-pressure water hoses during production to clean the floor, particularly near exposed product areas. Overspray could aerosolize and spread contamination from the floor onto food contact surfaces, or even directly onto the food itself. If you work in a dry plant, there is plenty of food and the temperature is generally pretty warm. But there's not a lot of water, which limits the ability of bacteria to grow. So be careful whenever you use water to spot clean in dry areas. Pests can get inside a facility if an exterior door is left open. So be sure to keep the doors closed when not in use. If you see any signs of pest infestation, report it immediately. Always keep any hose ends capped, properly hung, with the ends off the ground. Otherwise, they could become contaminated with bacteria that might be on the floor. Your facility probably has a color coding system for containers and cleaning tools used on the production floor, such as white for edible products or anything that touches a food contact surface, and yellow or red for inedible products that are condemned or may have touched a contaminated surface like the floor. Always use the correct tool or waste receptacle. The colors are there for a reason, to help you avoid biological cross-contamination. Consider the situation and what you would say to this person.
I woke up feeling sick, but I do have some medicine I can take. I should be fine for work.
What would you say to this person? Just be sure your work clothes are clean. Make sure to wash your hands before you get to your station. Stay home so you don't spread germs. Take your medicine with you to work. One way to help prevent biological contamination from you is to stay home if you are sick. Otherwise, you could spread bacteria and viruses to everything and everyone around you. When you do come to work, always follow your facility's good manufacturing practices or GMPs for employee hygiene. Which of the following is a way to prevent biological contamination? Putting inedible product into the wrong container, fixing a pipe with duct tape, coming to work sick, washing your hands regularly. Washing your hands regularly is a good way to help prevent biological contamination. To prevent biological contamination, stay home if you are sick. When you do come to work, always follow your facility's GMPs, such as wearing a clean uniform, washing your hands, and wearing gloves. If you touch something that could be contaminated, wash your hands again, and then change your gloves. Don't eat food or chew gum on the production floor. It could contaminate the area. Keep an eye on the facility. Watch for excessive water and report any pools, such as those caused by clogged drains or dripping pipes. If you see any signs of pests, report it immediately. And always use the correct tool. Your facility may use a color coding system to indicate the right tool for the job.
Where are you going with that pesticide?
I saw a bug on the factory floor, so I'm going to go kill it.
You can't spray that now. Production is still happening. Those chemicals could get on a food contact surface and contaminate the product.
I'll be careful.
It's against regulations, and you have to be an authorized professional to use pesticides in this factory.
Chemicals getting into the food is bad, but we don't want bugs to get in there either.
Have you ever tried to take pest control into your own hands? Chemical contaminants are things like pesticides, improperly used cleaning products, solvents, and unapproved lubricants. It's important to protect products from these hazards. Let's look at how this can be done. Sometimes pesticides are necessary to control insects and other pests, but if not used properly, they can get into the food product. That's why only authorized, licensed professionals are allowed to handle pesticides. If you see signs of insect infestation, report it immediately to your supervisor so they can contact the correct person. You also have to be trained and authorized to use cleaners, sanitizers, and solvents because they can get into the food if used incorrectly. Cleaners and other chemicals need to be stored away from food and processing equipment. And if chemicals are transferred from one container to another, they need to be properly labeled. Don't use unlabeled containers. Maintenance workers should never use non-food grade lubricants on parts of machinery that are on or over food contact surfaces, like a conveyor belt. If you see product on the line that is visibly contaminated with lubricants, tell your supervisor immediately. Also tell a supervisor immediately if you suspect a product has been contaminated with a chemical. Allergens, such as peanuts, soy, and sesame seeds, are also considered a chemical hazard if they're not supposed to be in a particular product. If your facility handles allergens, there will be an allergen management program in place to ensure that the food you produce is safe. Follow it always. Radiological hazards are another form of chemical hazard. This includes things like radium or uranium that can contaminate the ground and water used to grow foods. Consider this situation and what you would say to this person.
I like to keep some cleaner near my station in case I see dirt on the equipment.
What would you say to this person? Make sure the cleaner is organic. Wipe the equipment down after using any chemicals. You must be trained and authorized before using any cleaners. You must wear gloves to use spray cleaners. You must be trained and authorized to use cleaners, sanitizers, and solvents because they can get into the food if used incorrectly. Cleaners and other chemicals should be stored away from food and processing equipment. Before using cleaners and sanitizers, you must be trained and authorized. Transfer them to a new container. Have worked at the company for at least a year. Be familiar with the layout of the facility. You must be trained and authorized before using cleaners and sanitizers. Chemical contaminants are things like pesticides, improperly used cleaning products, solvents, and unapproved lubricating oils. To help prevent chemical contamination, only authorized, licensed professionals are allowed to handle pesticides. You also have to be trained and authorized to use cleaners, sanitizers, and solvents because they can get into the food if used incorrectly. If you suspect a product has been contaminated with a chemical, notify your supervisor immediately. Allergens such as peanuts, soy, and sesame seeds are also considered a chemical hazard if they're not supposed to be in a particular product.
attention. Fight contamination.
Physical hazards are things like plastic, metal, or glass that can get mixed into food and hurt someone. Physical contaminants can come in directly with the harvested raw product, such as rocks and dirt. Physical hazards can also come from raw ingredient packaging such as cardboard, plastic wrappers, liners, or tape, or even wood slivers or nails from pallets. Check boxes and packages to be sure they are in good condition with no holes or tears. Also, check packages in storage areas and watch for signs of insects or rodents. Within a facility, physical contaminants can include glass or brittle plastic, such as from a broken oven door or a light fixture. If you see any cracked or broken glass or brittle plastic anywhere around the production line, report it immediately. Cleaning tools like scrapers, brushes, scrub pads, sanitary gloves, and wipes can also get into food, so don't place supplies where they could fall onto the line. Metal contaminants usually come from the production line machinery, such as loose nuts and bolts. Metal can be removed in various ways. Magnets can catch certain metals as they pass through the line, and there's almost always a metal detector. The metal detector is often the last check in the line. This is often a critical control point or preventive control in your company's food safety plan. Sifters, screens, and magnets may be used to remove foreign matter, such as insects, rocks, or other undesirable materials that might be in dry ingredients. But don't rely on equipment to find everything. If you see a product with visible contaminants, follow your company's procedures to remove it from the line and notify your supervisor right away. Physical contaminants can come from you and your sanitary gear. Workers can accidentally let jewelry or hair get mixed into the food if they are not careful. This can be prevented by following your plant's GMPs and wearing hairnets properly. Don't carry personal items in your pants or the pockets of your smock. If the gloves you are wearing get torn, pieces could tear off and get into the product. Properly dispose of torn gloves and replace them immediately with a new pair. Maintenance workers can also pick up things from the shop, like metal shavings on their smocks and shoes. These can fall off in the production area and get into the food. And don't use tape for temporary repairs near food contact surfaces. The tape could tear and get into the food. Remember, if you see physical contamination in a product, remove it or follow your company's procedures for handling the contamination. Consider this situation and what you would say to this person.
One of the safety labels is about to fall off the equipment. I'm going to grab some tape to fix it.
What would you say to this person? Don't use tape. Glue is better. It's not important to repair the label. Don't use tape. It could tear and get into the food. Tape is fine. Just make sure you are wearing your gloves. Don't use tape for temporary repairs near food contact surfaces. The tape could tear and get into the food. If you see a product with physical contamination, remove it from the production line and notify a supervisor. What should you do if you see a product with physical contamination? Let it go down the line. Remove it from the production line. Go home for the day and assume someone else will catch it. Show it to your coworker. If you see a product with physical contamination, remove it from the production line and notify a supervisor. Physical hazards are things like plastic, metal, or glass that can get mixed into food and hurt someone. Physical contaminants can come in with raw products and from ingredient packaging. Within a facility, physical contaminants can include glass or brittle plastic, tools and supplies that fall into the product, or loose nuts and bolts from equipment. Physical contaminants can come from you and your sanitary gear. Workers can accidentally let jewelry, personal items, or hair get mixed into the food if they are not careful. If the gloves you are wearing get torn, pieces could tear off and get into the product. If you see a product with visible contaminants, follow your company's procedures to remove it from the line. Can anybody use pesticides? Should you report clogged drains? Could a water leak cause cross-contamination? Is a cutting tool an example of a food contact surface? Can insects cause cross-contamination? Is metal the only kind of physical food contamination? Can you help control biological hazards by following GMPs? Is it okay to go to work if you are sick? Is bacteria a physical hazard? Can anyone use cleaning chemicals?